Hey, I'm Nick Kalikas. Welcome to the show where you get first look at the latest odds before they hit the sports books.
And I'm Miguel Itturate.
This is the place for a unique look at MMA from a gambler's perspective.
And this is MMA Oddsbreaker. Welcome to the show. I'm Nick Kalikas. That's Miguel Itturate. Thanks for joining us again.
On today's show, we're going to get things kick-started by taking a look back at Nate Diaz's domination of Jim Miller. We're also going to look forward to some of the fights coming up on UFC on Fuel 3.
And on today's Oddsbreaker segment, I'll be joined by two of MMAOddsbreaker.com's very own Matty and Luca Fury. Both guys will help me break 4 original odds that have not hit the sports books yet.
All right, let's take a look back at last weekend's UFC on Fox 3 card. Nate Diaz, superstar. What do you think, Nick?
Wow, I was impressed by how dominant he was. I mean, that was, I think, Jim Miller's worst performance I've ever seen. I mean, but you got to give a lot of credit to Nate Diaz. He's picked up his game since the drop back down to lightweight. He's looked great. So, and I know I got to give you a little bit of credit too. On the show, the previous episode, actually, we both kind of were leaning towards Jim Miller, but that's not how it went down. And I give you credit because the week of the show, Miguel actually told me after weigh-ins that I'm leaning a little bit more towards Nate Diaz now. I think that you noticed something at the weigh-in. Give us a little bit of info on that.
Well, there are a couple of theories on what you look at when you're looking at a fight. You know, you can take all the information you have 3 months before, 2 months before when the lines break, and you can make your bet, and that's a great thing. I like to wait till the day of the fight to put my money on it and like to see if there's X factors. I just noticed something in Nate in the physical matchup that I liked that I hadn't picked up on before. I think there's another good example on this card too was Pat Barry, because Pat the whole week was talking about I was mentally tired, didn't want to do the interviews, didn't want to do things like that. I think that's a terrible sign. I put my money on LeVar on that fight, even though here on the show I had picked Pat. Pat's a higher skilled fighter, but he didn't have it up here, and it showed in the fight. LeVar took it to him.
So basically what you're saying is, and a lot of the professional gamblers out there can agree, that weigh-ins once in a while will sway you on a bet or two. You know what I mean? If you're liking one side after the weigh-ins, it's that important. If you see somebody's possibly drained, somebody had a rough weight cut, somebody weighed over. So definitely very important factor are the weigh-ins. So
yeah, I think the weigh-ins, I think the behavior at the press conferences, I think you get a read on their mindset, and you get a read on the physical matchups for the first time, really, you know, on come fight week. So I think it's important to wait. At least that's my strategy.
Yeah, I think all the information you can gather in general will help maybe give you a little edge, and sometimes that little edge is what comes through for you. But let's quickly touch on the other fights. As you mentioned, Pat Barry, lackluster performance. He was looking good early on, and then all of a sudden, LeVar Johnson got the win. Let's just say that. He looked dominant there.
Hey, you know, Pat Barry, I hear Brock Lesnar's looking for a tag team partner. You may have an option there, but UFC's no longer an option, man.
Yeah, I hate to say it, but I think probably Pat Barry's going to be cut here eventually down the road. But a couple other notable mentions. Alan Belcher did what many cannot. He avoided the sub from Paul Harris. I mean, you got to give him a lot of credit. It went to the ground, which I was a little afraid when I seen it hit the floor, because I thought Belcher had a great shot at pulling off the upset if he could keep this thing on the feet by knocking him out. But we've seen a little bit different a fight on play. What was your thoughts on that one?
I thought it was excellent. Belcher avoided a submission, and he avoided another one and another one. He stayed with it, and it wasn't a fluky thing. He showed skill throughout the entire fight. I was very impressed.
And one more honorable mention here, even though I think the judges probably got the decision wrong. Koch and Hendricks got the split decision. It was a very competitive fight. I personally gave the first round and the third round to Koch, but not a very surprising that it was a split. Again, it was very competitive. What's your quick thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I don't think either guy put himself in the title picture with that performance.
Okay, let's move on to the UFC on Fuel with the card that's coming up here. Main event between Dustin Poirier and Chang Sung Jung, the Korean Zombie. Poirier coming in as a betting favorite, minus 315. The comeback, plus 255 on the underdog. Give me your quick thoughts on this one.
I think the line's right on. I think Poirier is probably the favorite in the fight. I might take a little dog action just because I'm a fan of the Zombie.
See, I disagree. I think the Zombie's going to have a rough night here. I think it's a bad matchup for him. I think that the advantages that the Zombie might have in other fights, he doesn't here in Poirier. So I think Poirier probably grinds out a decision or a late stoppage here in this fight. But we'll see how it unfolds. Also, another fight I want to quickly touch on, which is going to be a tremendous battle, is between Donald Cerrone and Jeremy Stephens. Right now, the current odds from BetDSI have Cerrone as a 2.5 to 1 favorite. Minus 250, the comeback, plus 200. Give me your quick thoughts on this one.
Cerrone's got to show me some mental toughness. He's got to bounce back from his last performance, and I think he's got the tools to do it. And the line's right on again. I pick Cerrone on this fight.
I'm not necessarily going to count Jeremy Stephens out. I think that he's going to make it a competitive fight. He's got a lot of skill. We've seen big-time improvements from him. But like you just said, I think Cerrone deserves to be the favorite here. He's a little bit more well-rounded overall than Jeremy Stephens. But I think we're going to see a battle, and Jeremy Stephens could come out on top here. It's hard to bet against him in this particular bet. So I would probably pass or avoid this one completely. Or if I was going to bet, probably my money would go on Jeremy Stephens here. Time to introduce both of our guests for today's Oddsbreaker segment. First, the managing editor from MMAOddsbreaker.com, Matty Simo. Matty, welcome to the show.
Thanks, great to be here.
Also joining us once again, professional gambler and also from MMAOddsbreaker.com, Mr. Luca Fury. Luca, welcome back.
Hey, thanks for having me on. Glad to be here.
Now, of course, you guys know how the show works, but for those that don't, BetDSI is our sponsored sportsbook, and they've donated a $5K bankroll to both guys. Now, they get to bet $500 either on the favorite or the underdog. I've selected 4 fights for today, and we're going to get started with the first one. Comes to us from UFC on Fuel TV 4, July 11th, 2012, from San Jose, California. Now, the first fight is Mark Munoz versus Chris Weidman. It's going to be the main event, and we're going to start off with Matty first. Matty, I'm going to open up Chris Weidman, minus 125. The comeback on Mark Munoz is going to be minus 105. So basically a pick'em fight. Give me your thoughts.
Well, I think you said it all right there. It is basically a pick'em fight, and I was trying to make a case for the underdog, and this is one. I think we have some value on Munoz due to his experience and what is really otherwise an even fight. Now, Munoz is 7-1 in his last 8 fights. He's 7-2 in the UFC. In comparison, Weidman's 8-0 overall and 4-0 in the UFC. Now, both have beaten a common opponent in Demian Maia via unanimous decision. In fact, Weidman's last win came over Maia at UFC on Fox 2, January 28th. Now, I think the only reason Weidman's favored in this fight is because he's unbeaten. It's really a toss-up fight. It should be a close fight, but I'll take the more experienced fighter for a small price here and back Munoz.
All right, good stuff for Matty. He's going to go with Mark Munoz as a slight underdog here, minus 105. So it's going to be $525 to win $500. Let's throw it over to Luca Fury. Luca, do you agree or disagree with Matty?
I agree with a lot of the points he made. I do think that Mark Munoz probably deserves to be the favorite based on who he's fought and the experience he has. And I think that Matty's right, and Chris Weidman's probably only the favorite because he's undefeated and has a lot of hype behind him. But I actually do like Weidman in the fight. They fought one common opponent, like Matty pointed out, Demian Maia. But I thought Chris Weidman did better against Maia. I thought he definitely deserved the victory, although it was a close fight, whereas Mark Munoz, I thought, got outboxed and should have been on the losing end of a decision, but the judges gave it to him. But other than that, as far as their skills lineup, I think Weidman is either even or a little bit better in every area. As far as the striking goes, they're pretty even there, like I said, but I would give a slight edge to Weidman based on being a little more technical, and also he doesn't have the chin issues that Mark Munoz has. Mark has been hurt in a lot of fights, and that's definitely a concern, even though Weidman isn't a big power puncher. As far as the wrestling goes, Mark Munoz has been out-wrestled in fights or not been able to take opponents down when he should have been able to. He's also been taken down by guys who shouldn't have been able to take him down, like Chris Lieben took him down a couple of times when he shouldn't have even been able to come close to doing that. As far as jiu-jitsu goes, I would give the edge to Chris Weidman. He's done a lot of things in jiu-jitsu tournaments in a very short time of training Brazilian jiu-jitsu that really shouldn't have had the success he had. And so I would give the edge overall to Chris Weidman here based on being either a little bit better or even in every area. I think the fight is probably going to be a close decision either way, but I think there's the potential for Weidman to steal rounds with takedowns or maybe hurt Mark Munoz as well. So I would put my money on Chris Weidman here. It's not something I'm super confident in, though, and I wouldn't bet him at a much higher price than minus 125.
Okay, good stuff from Luca Fury. So you are going to lay the slight juice, $625 to win $500. Chris Weidman. Now, both of our experts split on this fight. Stay tuned for what me and Miguel have to say later in our odds adjustment segment. Time for the second fight on today's Oddsbreaker segment. Another huge fight, main event from UFC 149 that takes place July 21st, 2012 from Calgary, Alberta, Canada. The main event is a title fight between Jose Aldo and Erik Koch. Now we're going to start off with Luca Fury first on this one. Not a surprise here. Jose Aldo is going to open up the favorite, but I'm going to open to minus 385. The comeback on Koch is going to be plus 285. So Luca Fury, give me your take and give me your bet.
Well, I think what the fight really comes down to is who's the better striker, and I think most people will agree that's Jose Aldo, and really nothing else matters. Takedown defense might be an issue because Erik Koch does have a solid wrestling background, but I definitely don't think he's going to be able to take down Jose Aldo in this fight, and I don't think Jose Aldo is going to take him down either. So it's pretty much going to be a striking bout, and I got to favor Jose Aldo there. We haven't seen really anyone be able to do anything to him on the feet. He has very, very good defense, both in terms of blocking with his arms and as well as head movement. Good power, good speed. He's very good with footwork, setting up angles. Erik Koch is also a very good striker, but I just think he's a bit worse there. A bit worse in the defense department, footwork, speed. Maybe even has a slight edge, actually, goes to Erik Koch in terms of power. The shot he knocked out Rafael Assunção with was very impressive, moving backwards with a short little left hook. And who knows, maybe he can land something on Aldo and put him out or put him on roller skates and start the beginning of the end, but I just don't see it happening. The price is steep on Jose Aldo, but I got to bet it on him. I just can't see him losing this fight.
So Luca Fury is going to lay the steep price. It's going to be $19.25 to win 500 on Jose Aldo, the champion. Now let's get Matty Simo's thoughts. Matty, do you agree or disagree with Luca?
You know, Luca raises some great points. I totally agree with the way he thinks the fight's going to go. But just because of that, like possibility that there could just be like one shot that ends the fight, I'm going to take my shot with Koch as the plus 285 underdog. Now, Koch, for people who aren't familiar with him, he's a 23-year-old kid from Iowa. I think he's got some great value here. He reminds me a little of bantamweight contender Michael McDonald, a similar fighter with knockout power. 3 of his last 4 fights have ended in the first round. I watched the UFC at 149 press conference earlier today, and he seemed very hungry and excited, for this title shot. He's mentally strong. His only loss is to Chad Mendes, who ironically suffered his first career loss to Jose Aldo. Now he's got 7 submission wins, 3 by knockout, and 2 of his last 3 are knockout of the night honors. He's coming off a unanimous decision win over Ultimate Fighter 12 winner Jonathan Brookins, and I think another thing to consider is the 3-inch height advantage he has that could come into play. We saw that with Nate Diaz beating Jim Miller. If it is, a stand-up fight, that 3 inches could be the difference. And like you said earlier, if it's one shot, I'll take my 3-to-1 odds on Koch here.
Okay, great stuff from Matty on this fight. You are going with Erik Koch as the underdog, plus 285, so it's going to be 500 to win 1425. And we'll see if Erik Koch is the man to dethrone Jose Aldo at UFC 149. Okay, moving on to the third fight from our Oddsbreaker segment. Comes to us from UFC on Fox 4, which takes place August 4th, 2012 from Los Angeles, California. Another headlining bout between Brian Stann and Hector Lombard. Now we're going to start off with Matty first this time. Matty, another pick'em type fight, but I am going to open up Lombard minus 120. The comeback on Stann is going to be minus 110. Give me your take, give me your bet.
I actually wore my Greatest American Hero t-shirt in honor of Brian Stann, for those who remember that show in the 80s. Luke is probably too young, but it was a pretty funny show. But seriously, this is a guy who's only lost to Chael Sonnen and Phil Davis in his last 8 fights. He's 4-1 since moving to middleweight, with his only loss coming to Sonnen. He's coming off a first-round knockout of Alessio Sakara on April 14th in Sweden, which was very impressive. Now, everyone knows Brian Stann's story. He's a former Marine. He even backed off Sakara once he knew he was out, and that move alone made a lot of headlines, as a lot of people respected him, and he's just a guy you can root for. Hector Lombard, on the other hand, he's the Bellator middleweight champion, and that's about all I know about him. He was supposed to make his UFC debut at UFC 78, but had visa issues in Cuba. Now, he has not lost since 2006. He's 24-0-1 in his last 25. My big question is, who has he fought? Now, I saw Michael Bisping even was pissed off that Hector Lombard was jumping right into the mix, and I agree with him. I like Brian Stann in this one.
So Matty is going to lay the slight juice again, almost pick 'em odds, minus 110 on Brian Stann. So it's going to be 550 to win 500. Now let's get Luca Fury's take. Do you agree or disagree? Brian Stann the play?
I agree with him. Hector Lombard, he is on this incredible run, but he hasn't really fought anyone good. The best guy in there is Alexander Shlemenko, and he's probably maybe like a top 30, top 40 kind of middleweight. So really, Hector Lombard hasn't fought many good guys in the last several years. The best 2 guys he fought, he lost to. And Brian Stann's going to be a big test for him. I like the matchup, and I actually favor Brian Stann in it. You know, Hector Lombard, as good as his striking is, he doesn't really set it up. He just kind of charges forward and lunges with overhand rights and uppercuts and left hooks, but he doesn't use a jab well, doesn't really use footwork or angles. And Brian Stann, we saw him fight a guy kind of like that in Chris Weidman, and he ended up knocking him out in the first round. So there could be a potential for Brian Stann to do something similar to Hector Lombard, but if the fight goes past the first round, Hector Lombard has shown very poor cardio, always slows down considerably after the first 5 or 6 minutes. And I think if he doesn't knock out Brian Stann in the first round, Brian Stann's either going to knock him out or win a decision. So I put my money on Brian Stann. I like the price at about even money.
Okay, so both of our experts agree. Luca Fury is also going with Brian Stann. It's going to be $550 to win $500. And again, we're going to see probably Stann line climb up a little bit, but I wouldn't necessarily count Lombard out. And that will take place again, UFC on Fox 4, the headliner. Okay, guys, bonus time on today's Oddsbreaker segment. We're going to stick with UFC on Fox 4. We're going to head over to Ryan Bader versus Lyoto Machida. It's going to be on the main card for sure. Machida is going to enter as a favorite, -285. The comeback on Bader is going to be +215. We're going to start off with Luca Fury first on this fight. Luca, give me your thoughts and give me your bet.
Well, my first thought is, who at Zuffa hates Ryan Bader so much? Because he basically was fed to John Jones to make John Jones look good before getting his eventual title shot. Then he got fed to Rampage, which was a horrible style matchup for him, although he ended up winning that fight because Rampage came in so out of shape. And now he's getting fed to Lyoto Machida on Fox for basically a showcase for Machida. I mean, I really don't see a way Ryan Bader can win this fight. He's not going to be able to take Lyoto down, and he's definitely not going to be able to outstrike him. I mean, Ryan Bader's footwork is so bad. It looks like seriously like a guy it's his first day of striking. He just kind of hobbles around, doesn't really have any real sense of footwork. And as far as his punching and striking goes, it's just an overhand right. That's pretty much all he has, and he telegraphs it. I think Lyoto, a guy who has excellent footwork, excellent at counters, and Lyoto's very good at capitalizing on guys who have very, very small mistakes. Well, Ryan Bader has massive mistakes in his striking. So I think this is going to be all Lyoto Machida. Probably gets a second-round knockout, I'd say, but who knows? He is coming off a few losses now. He was 1-3 in his last 4 fights, so maybe he plays it safe and it looks kind of more like the Cheeto Ortiz fight, but I favor Lyoto Machida big here, and I think there's a great chance for him to get the knockout and put on a great show on Fox.
Okay, Fury laying the juice on Lyoto Machida. It's going to be -285, so $14.25 to win $500. Now, let's throw it over to Matty Simo. Matty, do you agree or disagree? Machida the play here?
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think Luca's right on the money here. Ryan Bader has done nothing to impress me whatsoever. He split his last 4 fights, and he's 15-2. His last 2 wins have come over Jason Grills and a washed-up Rampage Jackson. I still personally can't get over his loss to Tito Ortiz. Anybody who loses to Tito Ortiz and is supposed to be an up-and-coming fighter, I just have no respect for it whatsoever. Now, on the other hand, Lyoto Machida, I think you're getting some good value. If he hadn't lost 3 of his last 4 fights, he would probably be a much bigger favorite in this situation. And the guys he's lost to, I mean, he's lost to John Jones, the light heavyweight champion. He is the former light heavyweight champion himself, and I think he clearly needs this fight to get back into the mix at light heavyweight, and I think he'll knock out Ryan Bader, just like Luca said.
Okay, so Matty's also confident in Lyoto Machida. He's going to lay the juice, $14.25 to win $500. So both of our experts do agree, Lyoto Machida over Ryan Bader. Okay, fantastic stuff from both of you guys today on the Oddsbreaker segment. Thank you for coming on. We really appreciate it. This is the time I'll let you guys plug your websites or anything you'd like to say to the viewers before we let you go. So let's start off with Matty. Matty, anything you'd like to say?
Yeah, you know what? I'm just really happy to be part of the MMA Oddsbreaker team. I'm really happy that Luca is working with me. We're going to put up some great content on the website. I think this is content that MMA fans will not be able to find anywhere else on the internet. And I think just everybody should go to www.MMAOddsbreaker.com, check out all the great stuff we have, and you can also follow me on Twitter at Vegas_Matty.
All right, and what about you, Luca? Anything you'd like to say before we let you go?
You can check me out on Twitter as well. I'm at Gambling Fury. Love talking about MMA and betting, so if you have any questions, hit me up there. And also make sure you check out MMAOddsbreaker.com. I'll be having some articles and some other content going up in the future.
All right, guys, thanks again. Glad to have you aboard MMA Oddsbreaker, and we'll see you down the road.
Welcome back to the show. Another great Oddsbreaker segment. Our special guest delivering a lot of information for us to absorb. A lot of line changes that we got to make here. Before we get into them, though, I'm going to have Nick explain to you about the adjustments that we're going to make.
Now, generally speaking, when lines do hit the sports books, you'll notice some movement when a few max bets come in. So we're going to take that same principle, same philosophy, and put it into play here in our Oddsbreaker adjustment segment. We're going to start off with the first fight. It was Chris Weidman versus Mark Munoz. Now, I opened the line -25, Chris Weidman. I know people are going to be a little surprised that Munoz is not the favorite here, but it's basically a pick'em fight. Both guys did split, though. So the line is going to stay the same. I'm not going to adjust the line. It's going to come in at minus 125, Chris Weidman, come back minus 105 on Mark Munoz. Let's get Miguel's thoughts on this.
Personally, I'm staying away from this fight. I do think it's a pick 'em fight, very hard fight to pick. I think Weidman comes in a little bit hotter, a little bit more attention on him. It's been a while since we've seen Munoz, and Munoz's personality is kind of a little subdued and stuff. I think people may be sleeping on Munoz, but I'm going to stay away from this fight.
Okay, at this point, for me, I'm going to lean with Luca a little bit here. I think that Chris Weidman does have a slight edge almost in every area in this fight, other than experience, of course, with the record indicating that. But Chris Weidman's probably the side I do see him either taking a close decision or maybe a late stoppage, and that's of right now. And we mentioned earlier in the show, after weigh-ins and after time goes by, that could change. But early on, I'm leaning towards Chris Weidman. Let's move on to the second fight. It was another great fight. Champion Jose Aldo is defending his title against Erik Koch. Now, a lot of people are surprised by Erik Koch getting this title shot. I think he's a guy that's kind of deserving of that shot. He's a talented fighter, and he's getting the opportunity, and I'm sure he's going to make most of it. I am opening Jose Aldo a big favorite, minus 385. A comeback on Koch, plus 285. Once again, the guy's split. Let's get Miguel's take.
Well, with Frankie Edgar not coming down to the division, there really wasn't a clear-cut fight for Jose Aldo next. And this is as good a fight as any, but I got to take Jose on this one. The kid's been dominant, and until somebody shows me a chink in his armor, I'm gonna pick him.
Yeah, he's coming in as a high favorite. Again, we said that the both of our guests split. My feelings on this fight, I think that Erik Koch's going to show up, and he's going to give this a competitive fight. I think it's going to hopefully go 5 rounds, and we're going to see a battle back and forth. Obviously, Jose Aldo has a big edge in this fight. Stylistically, this should stay on the feet, and he's going to be the more accurate, more dangerous striker of the two. But Erik Koch is going to be game, and he's going to come to fight for sure. I'm not going to adjust this line either. It's going to hit the sports books at minus 385, plus 285, and we'll see where it goes from there. Okay, the third fight we're going to adjust is another awesome battle. I'm really excited about this one. At middleweight, Hector Lombard versus Brian Stann. Hector Lombard making his UFC debut. I've been waiting for this for a long time. Bellator's champion, a talented fighter. He is coming in the slight favorite, minus 120, but again, another one of those fights is basically a pick 'em. The comeback is minus 110, but we had both guys take Brian Stann in this fight. So they're laying the juice, minus 110 odds on Brian Stann. What's your thoughts?
I think it's a very interesting fight. I think Stann is a very stiff test, definitely the stiffest test Lombard's had probably in his career. He hasn't lost since 2006, as we pointed out, but this is a big test, and it's going to show us the difference in the UFC's talent pool versus the other talent pool that's out there. I would pick Lombard in this fight, though. I think there's a lot of motivation and there's a lot of social economics that go into it, and the fact of the matter is the UFC does know what they're doing when they're looking for talent. They pursued him. They gave this guy an offer that could not be matched by his original company, so I think they see something in him as well.
Yeah, and they're coming in. I agree with that point as well. I think they're bringing him in as a headliner. They know he's an exciting fighter. I think he's got a really good shot in this fight. I think that Brian Stann might have the edge. He's going to have the reach. If it's a striking battle, I know a lot of people are going to think so, but the speed factor in Hector Lombard, and he's got the ability to transition his fight to the floor. I think he's got better BJJ. He's just got a few better areas that he might be able to exploit here. But again, Brian Stann's just been getting better and better, so it's hard to count him out. Another pick-em fight here, but I am going to slide it over to minus 120, Brian Stann. The comeback's going to be minus 110 now in Hector Lombard. So both guys coming in did affect the line, and it did sway it a little bit, but still near pick-em. Okay, the bonus fight adjustment between Lyoto Machida and Ryan Bader. Both guys did bet Lyoto Machida. So the line's going to be adjusted from minus 285 to minus 300. What's your thoughts on this one?
I think Machida's probably the highest skilled guy in the division besides John Jones, obviously. I think he's a guy that, because he's quiet and because he's Brazilian and hasn't hit the press here, is still underrated. I think he could be a potential guy in the top 10 pound for pound, and I think Machida runs with this.
It is a difficult fight, I think, for Ryan Bader. You know, he did come off of an impressive win. I know, like Luca pointed out earlier, Rampage wasn't really 100% coming into that fight, but he's coming off a little bit of momentum, so hopefully he shows up and it'll be a fight. But like we said, the odds are going to be minus 300, plus 230 when it does hit the sports books for Lyoto Machida.
Now it's time for our mailbag segment here at MMA Oddsbreaker. If you have any questions about MMA or about the odds that Nick breaks for us right here on the show, go ahead and shoot us an email at MMAOddsbreaker@gmail.com. If we use your question and you've included your address, we'll send you a free gift. Today's question comes to us from Mikey from Oklahoma. He wants to know what the UFC is doing with Strikeforce. There seems to be a lot of confusion around their secondary promotion. I agree with that, Nick. What do you think?
Who knows? I mean, I think honestly, it's a lot of people are suspecting that they're eventually going to cut it and do away with Strikeforce. I know when they extended the new Showtime deal or whatnot, people got excited they was going to stick around. But I think it's pretty obvious that Zuffa doesn't care much about Strikeforce. The way they're promoting it, the website, just various items. So I hate to say it, but my guess is that Strikeforce is going to go away.
Well, he says the way they're promoting. I'd like to go out and say the way they're not promoting it. We've got a couple of great fights coming up this weekend, or in 2 weeks, rather, and they're doing nothing with it. You got Barnett and Cormier, you got Melendez and Thompson. You could run with that show, and they're just not doing it. They should just let it die. They're really not taking care of it the way they did WEC, and I'm surprised for that because Zuffa's always been very organized, and they really don't look good in their handling of the Strikeforce promotion.
Yeah, and there's a lot of talented fighters over there on the Strikeforce roster that we would like to see come over to the Zuffa and the UFC. So hopefully they get it straight and we see some progress. Either they do merge the companies or they start paying a little bit more attention to the Strikeforce brand and give us some promotion.
Well, that's it for another episode of MMA Oddsbreakers. You can look for the odds that Nick broke right here on the show to start popping up at the sport books throughout the coming week. And a big special thanks to our 2 guests, Matty Simo and Luca Fury. Thanks again, guys. A lot of great information.
Also, make sure you check out our new website, MMAOddsbreaker.com. And for all the latest show updates, make sure you follow us on Twitter at MMAOddsbreaker. For Miguel Itturate, I'm Nick Kalikas saying until next time, enjoy the fights.